I am going to be introducing Dr. Susan Riegg. Dr. Riegg is a Medical College of Wisconsin graduate and is board certified in both anatomic and clinical pathology. She currently specializes in bioidentical hormones and the HCG, or the human choriogonadotropin diet, with a focus on risk reduction for cancers and chronic disease. She is a trained speaker for the Institute of Responsible Technology. I love that name. And serves as vice president of the WIMS board. Just so you know, we have every WIMS board member here today. Myself as the president, Dr. Riegg as the vice president, John Wikulski is our treasurer, Deb Muth is here, Kara Patajan, Jackie Pickell, and Norman Schwartz. So everybody on the WIMS board is actually here today. If you see any of us and you want to ask about WIMS or how to join, please pull us aside. And we are well represented today. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Riegg. The title of her talk is "Don't Put That in Your Mouth: The Health Hazards of Genetically Modified Foods, or GMOs." Dr. Riegg.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to try and take you on a whirlwind tour of the world of GMOs. My goal is just to give you a major overview. Obviously, we could talk about this problem for hours and hours, and I think I only have 30 minutes. So I'm going to talk very fast, just give you a really quick overview of many, many issues related to genetic modification of our food supply. Please don't be concerned if you miss anything, or if I talk too fast, or if I roll through the slides too fast. All of the slides for all of the speakers are going to be available on our website. And as was described before, we also are going to have the videotapes available. Oops, I'm too close to the mics. So let me just get started. Just as a brief overview, just to kind of get us started, what are GMOs? GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. This is an infographic, which I'm not going to go over, but obviously it'll be in the PowerPoint slides that you can look at your leisure in the future. I'm going to go into a little bit detail about some of these aspects of GMOs. So what is a GMO, and how is it different than other genetically modified types of materials? A GMO basically is, particularly we're talking about our food. A GMO is a food where we've taken a gene from a different organism and inserted it into a crop. And I'm going to talk about what, in this country, the major crops are that we're dealing with as far as these transgenic species. In the scientific world, we have genetic modification of all kinds of things for other uses, for pharmaceuticals and so on, but I'm specifically concerned with talking about genetic modification of our food supply. The most commonly modified crops in this country come in two flavors, so to speak, and that is Roundup Ready and pesticide producing. So Roundup Ready just means that the crop has been genetically modified to be resistant to the toxic effects of glyphosate, which is the major, or the active ingredient in Roundup. And pesticide producing means that the gene for pesticide produced by Bacillus thuringiensis bacteria has actually been inserted into the crop. So some examples of GMOs in this country, as far as agriculture, the main ones are soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar from sugar beets, and then much smaller quantities of things like alfalfa, which is really only used for animal feed, crookneck squash, zucchini, and Hawaiian papaya. And obviously on the right-hand side, you see all of the medical life-saving products, which these are all good things. We're not concerned about that because they don't reproduce uncontrolled in the environment. This slide shows basically that the derivatives of canola, corn, cotton, and soy are found in many, many of our processed foods. And really, this is the problem. I mean, most of our produce is not genetically modified. The majority of the problem is in corn and soy, and it seems like, well, what's the big deal? It's just two major plants. Well, the big deal is that the derivatives of corn and soy are present in all of our processed food. So this nice photo shows a large list of things that contain soy. And again, we're looking at many, many processed foods. Soy is a fantastic source of protein, and you know, historically, processed soy was used in food because it is such a high quality source of protein. But that's backfired a little bit. This you can look at again in the PowerPoint slides on the website, but this basically details all the wonderful qualities, not just the micronutrients and omega-3s, but all the high quality protein of soy. But now that Biotech has taken this plant and basically made it a transgenic plant to be either pesticide producing or Roundup ready, it's really causing a lot of health problems in our country. Another major problem is that soy is the main component in the vast majority of baby formula. It always has been. But genetic modification of soy really started to become prominent just in the last 10 years. And so all of our babies that are getting baby formula are getting genetically modified soy. So we're basically eating, if we're eating processed food, we're eating GMOs every single day. So let's talk a little bit, just a very brief overview about how GMOs are made. Obviously, I really want to make a distinction about what's the difference between a GMO plant and a hybridized crop, because there's a lot of confusion about that, and people often say, well, farmers have been modifying crops for thousands of years. Well, and this is true, but they haven't been taking genes from other species and inserting them into crops. So what farmers have been doing is cross-hybridizing and cross-pollinating and you know, doing those kinds of things. But what scientists are doing now is, again, taking genes from completely unrelated species, and this would never happen in nature. So for example, you could take the gene from, say, salmon and put it into a strawberry. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about this, but this photo basically gives a little bit of history about what farmers have been doing for 10 or 12,000 years, kind of crossbreeding plants and optimizing plants for better yield and for drought resistance and for pest resistance, and that is not the same as genetic modification. So how does genetic modification work? Basically, we're identifying a gene with a desired trait. The gene is basically changed in such a way that it will be able to work inside of plants. It's prepared, transformed, and then inserted into the plant. And then it's cloned in tissue culture. So I'm not going to go through this at all. I want to kind of move quickly. But this photo shows a scientist in the lab basically shooting a gene gun. So the way this works in the lab is that millions or billions of microscopic gold particles are coated with a desired gene. They are shot at a very high velocity onto the cells of the plant, and some of them will successfully combine with the DNA of the plant. This is just sort of a diagram to show just sort of the gene construct. So you see in the middle is the desired gene, and you also see that there's incorporated with the desired gene is a gene for antibiotic resistance, and that is important for actually isolating the cells that have accurately incorporated the desired gene. So then those cells are basically placed onto a petri dish with a nutrient medium that also has incorporated the antibiotic, and so only the cells that have incorporated the gene with the desired trait, and right next to it the gene for antibiotic resistance, will actually grow on this plate. Now, does anybody think that's a good idea to incorporate a gene for antibiotic resistance into our food? Okay, good. So I didn't think that was a good idea either. And just to show you how easy this is to do, this is a photograph of my daughter Margie's science experiment when she was a senior at Homestead High School last year. Their class took the gene from a jellyfish and inserted it into E. coli, and these are colonies viewed under ultraviolet light. And she took that on her iPhone and sent it to me and was very proud, and I was very horrified. A little bit of the history of GMOs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but I do want to point out a couple of things. You know, a lot of people say, well, how could this possibly happen in this country? How could our government allow this? Well, long story short, we got on a little bit of a slippery slope in 1978 when the first living organism was allowed to be patented. And if you're interested in that, that's a whole nother talk in itself. In 1992, the FDA actually ruled that it was allowable for GMOs to be patented and to be distributed into our food supply without any studies done on humans. So the first real genetically modified food was distributed into our food supply in 1994, and that was the Flavor Savor tomato. So this is a graph showing the increase in genetically modified crops in our country. And so on the far left, I believe it's 1998, and on the far right, going to 2010. And so you see the dramatic increase in genetically modified soy. At this point, 96 or 95% of our soy in this country is genetically modified, and about 90% of corn. And this graph actually shows the difference between some of it is pesticide producing, so that's BT corn, and some of it is Roundup Ready. And by the way, last year in 2012, we actually had the first crop of sweet corn that was not only Roundup Ready, but also pesticide producing, so we get two for the price of one. So the United States currently produces the largest percentage of GMO crops in the world. 68% of GMO crops in the world are produced here. As far as who regulates GMOs in the country, it's a little bit confusing. The USDA, the FDA, and the EPA all pretty much have a hand in it in various ways, but the FDA is really responsible for ensuring the safety of our food supply. Going back to whether or not this is safe for us or not, there have been many, many animal studies done. There have been no human studies. Animal studies have been done and have shown a significant increase in disease, cancer, all kinds of chronic health problems. These particular photos show animals treated, or obviously laboratory rats, treated not only with Roundup. One study treated with Roundup, one study treated with GMOs, and one study treated with both Roundup and GMOs. Incidentally, when these tumors were looked at under the microscope, they were tumors of mammary origin, which is breast cancer. And as far as have there been any human studies on health risks, there have been none performed, and the FDA is not requiring that health studies be performed. Actually, what the FDA's policy is that biotech companies perform the health studies and submit that to the FDA. So Monsanto and the other biotech companies will perform their studies. They'll do it for a very short period of time, maybe 2 days, and maybe 3 days, and say there were no adverse findings and submit those studies, and the FDA will say fine and approve it, and that's the extent of it. So at this point, there is really no one taking responsibility for food safety. Now, what's so interesting to me about this is that the FDA clearly, and this is going back to 1992, so this is 21 years ago, the FDA clearly took the stand that there's no difference between genetically modified food and regular food, so we don't have to worry about it and everybody can go ahead and eat it. So Monsanto and all biotech companies are thrilled with that, but then they run across the street to the patent office and they get their foods patented. So this is the greatest incongruent juxtaposition of the modern era. On the one hand, the food is so substantially equivalent it doesn't need to be labeled. But on the other hand, it's so unique that they can patent it. And if anybody dares to save the seed and replant it, they sue the farmer. So it's insane. It's absolutely crazy. So going back, here's I did a search on the U.S. Patent Office website. Actually, this was back at the beginning of the year. I searched how many patents Monsanto had, and at that time they had over 22,000 patents. And it turns out they don't just have patents on GMO seed. They're getting patents on non-GMO seed now too. So if you look at what biotech companies now are doing since 1992, they're buying up seed companies. So this infographic basically shows, in the red circles are all the biotech companies, and they are buying up seed companies and patenting the seed. So it's not just the GMOs, it's control of the food supply. So what exactly is the problem with GMOs in our food supply? Well, overview of health risks, obviously. We have a lot of concerns about not only foods that produce pesticides, but foods that contain Roundup residues. It is an undisputed fact in the scientific literature that the active ingredient in Roundup, which is glyphosate, is an endocrine disruptor. And endocrine disruptors cause cancer. And I don't think anybody in this room will disagree with that. There's quite a bit of scientific literature. This is a white paper written by the Endocrine Society about endocrine disrupting chemicals, strong evidence for fetal malformations, thyroid disruption, neuroendocrine disruption, and so on. The American Academy of Environmental Medicine came out 5 years ago with a very strong statement. This is an organization of MDs and physicians basically urging all physicians to recommend a non-GMO diet for their patients. If you're interested in reading more or learning more about the health risks of GMOs in our food supply, this is the documentary to watch. It's Genetic Roulette by Jeffrey Smith. Going on to environmental concerns, I could talk for 3 hours on this. I won't. I'm going to have to rush through this really fast. We'll just talk about a few environmental concerns. First of all, it's already been touched on very briefly about problems with the way our livestock is being raised. Now our livestock is being fed GMO alfalfa and GMO corn, and then we're eating that livestock. Obviously, the cattle are being treated with bovine growth hormone, which is made by Monsanto. It's a huge problem. So grass-fed cattle, this is how cattle were intended to be raised. This is what we're doing now. CAFOs are confined animal feeding operations. And the reason they're confined like this is that if they move less, they get fatter faster, and they go to market faster, and it's more profitable and so on. But as you can imagine, this is devastating to our environment. The waste from these animals and the methane from their gas is contributing to global warming. So some more environmental problems. It turns out that genetically modified soy is perfectly suited to grow in Brazil in the Amazon rainforest. So now what's happening is the Amazon is just being completely decimated, just being completely torn down to grow GM soy. Now this graph is a little misleading because these bars show the amount of GM soy that's being grown over many years, but this is not cumulative. So this is per year. So what you really should do is add these on each year and it would just be skyrocketing. These are photos from Google Earth that basically show the Brazilian Amazon, and I can't really see it, but I think the first one is from 1975, the second one, thank you, 1999, and the third one, 2001. So this gives you an idea what's being done to the Amazon. Now, this area of Brazil is the largest aquifer on the planet, so this is contributing to global warming. This is the area of the Guarani aquifer. So quite a few environmental problems to worry about. Farmer problems, I'm going to kind of rush through that. The makers of these herbicides, Roundup and so on, claim that they'll get increased yield and so on, but it turns out that is true for a year or two, but then we have emergence of Roundup-resistant superweeds, and this is becoming an enormous problem all over the world, actually. So on this map, you can see the distribution of herbicide-resistant weeds. And what's happening then is the farmers have to use higher and higher concentrations of Roundup, and the superweeds are outgrowing even that. So now they're coming out with 2,4-D. Does anybody know what 2,4-D is? 2,4-D is a component of Agent Orange that was used in Vietnam, okay, to level the forest. So that's what's on the horizon. Economic and social problems. Documentary I urge you to watch, Bitter Seeds. It turns out in India, there had been over 250,000 farmer suicides because of debt related to Monsanto's GM cotton. What's so different about India? Well, it turns out Monsanto is enticing farmers to get heavily in debt to buy their seed, and it's patented, so they can't save the seed. They have to buy it every year. And the seed is failing, and they're getting heavily in debt. In India, if the farmer dies, the debt dies with him, and it doesn't stay with the family. So the farmers are killing themselves so that their family doesn't have to pay the debt. It's an enormous problem. Just Google it. There have been over 250,000 farmer suicides in India in the last 15 years. So there's a documentary on that. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I just want to give 1 minute to the other side. What are the benefits that Biotech and Monsanto say that they are offering to us? So let's go over that. So according to Monsanto, they're saying that the crops are more pest resistant. Well, that's true because every cell of those crops are making pesticides. So it depends if you want to eat the pesticide, but yeah, that's true. Herbicide resistant, yes, we've talked about that, but we're also eating the herbicide. Drought resistant, that may or may not be true, but of course we're having more and more droughts because they're leveling the rainforest. Higher yield, that's not true, and my next slide will address that. Nutritionally fortified, that is debatable, and the last one here is irrelevant. There is a PDF written by the Permaculture Research Institute. The argument about how the genetically modified crops are going to yield more, it's false. And this is about a 65-page paper that took 5 years to write. It's called Failure to Yield by the Permaculture Research Institute, so you can take a look at that if you're interested. The other argument is that with genetically modified foods, we're feeding the world, feeding a starving world. That's nonsense. We don't have starving populations because of lack of food. We actually have way more food than we need. The problems with starving populations is due to societal problems and not to lack of food. It's due to political and societal problems. So the real benefits to consumers are none. Zip, zero, nada. There are no benefits to us to have genetically modified food in our food supply. Okay, so what's going on with the rest of the world? Well, many countries have GMO mandatory food labeling laws. The entire European Union is GMO free. And at the bottom I have written here, is this an overreaction to concerns about GMOs? I don't think so. As far as who are the biggest GMO lovers, you can see number 1 is the USA. Number 2 is Brazil. I've already addressed that with the GMO soy. Number 3 is Argentina, and number 4 is Canada, and the rest are much smaller. So, as far as current events related to GMOs, I think the big thing that everybody's reading in the news is the fight for mandatory labeling of GMOs, which I'm sure everybody's heard of. Food companies are fighting this tooth and nail, right? If you saw the Colbert Report, this was hilarious. He basically said, of course, America's food manufacturers don't want to label GMOs in their food. They don't even know if there's food in their food. And I just love that. That was so true. So, the main argument of Monsanto and all these other companies trying to convince people to fight against labeling is that it's going to dramatically increase the price of food, which is total nonsense. And Sir Paul McCartney came out and basically said, we did this in Europe 10 years ago. We mandated labeling, we got rid of GMOs. It didn't increase the cost of food at all. So last year we had the California ballot. I'm sure everybody heard of that. The right to know, the Proposition 37. It failed, and it failed 49% to 51%. Now, if you polled the American people, 93% of people want to know if there's GMO food on their plate. But the reason it failed is because these food companies and Biotech spent $55 million on advertising and propaganda and commercials convincing people that it was not in their best interest to know what was in their food. And the same thing happened last week in Washington, the Washington state ballot. That was a 48 to 52%, and it lost. So at this point in this country, there is no mandatory labeling yet, but it's coming. So more current events. I'm almost done. Everybody probably has heard that Whole Foods is mandating labeling of their foods in a couple of years. Chipotle is the first restaurant to mandate GMO labeling of their foods. Now, this photo really interested me because there's corn in there. So at least they're admitting there's GMOs corn in there. So what we're trying to do is achieve the tipping point of consumer rejection. I mean, none of us are ever going to shut down Biotech or Monsanto or anything like that. But those of us that are very passionate about this want to just educate people about what's in your food supply and urge you to not eat this stuff. And it's not like we have to have 50% of the population to drive this. We only need 5% of the population to get us to the tipping point of consumer rejection so that food companies take notice and lose enough market share so that they make the decision to switch from GMO ingredients to non-GMO ingredients. And that's what we're going for. So we're very close to that. Another thing going on right now, probably you've heard, GMO salmon is going to be the first live animal. It's going to be approved any day. It's made by a company called Aqua Bounty. They've been working on this for 20 years. This is going to be an unmitigated disaster because this salmon is huge, and it's going to be raised in farms in the Atlantic. And Aqua Bounty basically says that they'll be contained, and if they do escape, there's going to be no risk to the native natural salmon population. That's all nonsense. It's nonsense. So, wheat. I just want to say one thing about wheat. Wheat is not genetically modified. It's cross-pollinated and hybridized. At this point, it's not a transgenic crop. It's not genetically modified. It has a lot of other problems, but it's not genetically modified. However, earlier this year, there was an unapproved Monsanto crop found growing in Oregon, and there's a lot of legal action going on about that because in this country, GM wheat is not allowed. So what can be done? Call to action. Don't buy or consume GMOs. Don't obviously educate yourself and others. There's a non-GMO shopping guide, and I hope each of you got that in your goodie bag. If you didn't, I have some extras with me here. Grow your own food, farmers markets, activism, volunteer, and so on. As far as growing your own food, there's no excuse not to grow your own food anymore because you can get a vertical garden in your house. And this is amazing. Actually, I'm getting my first vertical garden. This is aquaponics here. And if you don't have any space, if you don't have a yard, you can have this in your kitchen and grow your own herbs and your vegetables and so on. I'm actually not an affiliate for them, but I should be. Okay, so another quick point. A lot of people ask, is stuff that's organic, non-GMO? The answer is yes. And so this slide, look at it on the website. It has all the details about organic and non-GMO and so on. Okay. So this is a non-GMO shopping guide. I'm hoping everybody got that in their goodie bag. Just to review, the 8 genetically engineered foods to avoid are soy, corn, cotton, canola, Hawaiian papaya, sugar from sugar beets, zucchini. I'm going to skip over this. Oh, okay. So my brother, actually my family is getting really sick of hearing me talk about problems with our food supply. And my brother wants to know, what about a free day? And my answer to that is, well, there's all kinds of GMO-free beers, so you just got to look hard enough. If you're looking for more resources, these are the websites to look at. ResponsibleTechnology.org is the website of Jeffrey Smith. And Seeds of Deception is where to buy if you're interested in brochures, books, and so on. The Non-GMO Speakers Bureau, if anybody's interested in being a speaker for the Institute of Responsible Technology, there's speaker training, so you can go on this website and go through the speaker training. At this point, there's only 3 speakers in the state of Wisconsin. I think we need more, so if you're interested in that, take a look at that. Since I'm up here, I'm going to just promote myself real quickly. I am actually working at 3 different locations. So my main location is at Green Square Center of the Healing Arts. Now, if you're not familiar with Green Square Center, it's a wonderful community of integrative and holistic practitioners. Holly and Armin, are you here? Can you stand up? Where's Holly and Armin? There's Holly and Armin, the owners of Green Square. Give them a little hand. So they are the owners of a marvelous community of practitioners. Most of the practitioners at Green Square are here today. If you aren't familiar with Green Square, please see their booth out in the hallway.